Everybody Wants Some. Classic Richard Linklater film. Oh, look at that. Zoey Deutch is in this. Forget about that sometimes. And she's on the back cover as well. Very flattering. So the question comes down to, is this a worthwhile choice in her catalogue? Does she have a worthwhile catalogue of films? Well, I figured I'd take it upon myself to watch a large selection of her films. I think I've watched about 8 of her films, maybe 9. I'll have to double check that. We'll see as the timestamps appear on the video. And yeah, we'll take a look at each individual film and what she has contributed in terms of her role. We'll analyse by the end of it whether these films are good films or bad films, and whether her performances are welcome or not. Is she a good addition? Is she a good performance? That kind of thing. I'm not going to dive as fully into the plots of these films like I used to in my older videos. I kind of want to make these videos a bit quicker, also because most of the time these videos can usually run for an hour and a half, and it's like, you could watch one of these films in that amount of time, So I figure, let's just kind of get through it all. I don't know if there'll be many spoilers for films that she's in terms of her roles. Probably not. But still, we'll take a look and endeavour into the world of Zoey Deutch. Let's take a look. I guess I'll go in chronological order of releases. In this case, we're going to start with 2014's Vampire Academy. I believe it's directed by Mark Waters, or it's directed by Peter Waters. They're brothers. One of them wrote it, one of them directed it. You'll know because one of them directed Mean Girls. The other one writes stuff. I don't know if he's written anything good. Let's take a look. It's directed by Mark Waters. I believe. Let's look at. Oh, don't look at the producers. Let's look at the writer. We've got Daniel Waters. Okay, so Daniel Waters wrote Heathers, Batman Returns, Demolition Man. He's written 8 films. Hudson Hawk. Interesting. The director, on the other hand, Mark Waters, they directed Mean Girls and Freaky Friday. But then he also did He's All That and Mr. Popper's Penguins. Oof, what a collection of films. So let's dive into this film. I gave it as a review, as a film. I gave it 1 star. But what did I have to write about it? Oh God, is this an awful film? And luckily, one of the last films I decided to watch, given I had to rent it, because surprisingly a lot of Deutsch's films I actually own, or they're on like Disney Plus or other streaming services. Thank God. Despite being given basically the lead role, it's actually a dual role, but she, narrates, so she's basically the leading lady. Vampire Academy is a stain on her career, and I don't even think it helped her get into the limelight for other potential roles, given she hasn't really played a similar character since. I mean, directly similar, given she's still done teen roles and romance roles. She hasn't really done, strongly action-heavy roles, so if you would classify this as an action-heavy role. She's your cliché badass hero type who is basically a glorified bodyguard for another cliché teen girl. She pulls some punches and kicks, and surprisingly is pretty awful at fighting, even in the film. She doesn't even defeat her final opponent in the final fight. Someone else does it for her. She has all this setup and training, and she can't even kill one person. It's kind of ridiculous. She's fine at playing the overprotective sister-like character, but her character is written into a formulaic teen convention. Fight the bullies, fall for the handsome guy, minor love triangle, but not really. The other girl gets the bigger love triangle. And, of course, save the best friend. The film itself is a long mess of quick dialogue and so much backstory and added details about classes of magic users and family trees and monsters and so much stuff crammed into one film that it's really mind-numbing. I actually almost fell asleep whilst watching it, but that was just because it was when you have too much information thrown at you at once, and you're just this is switching my brain off rather than making me more focused. It was basically that effect. But Zoe, for the most part, she's fine. She, carries the film as most people would that's a good deeming quality for some of her films. She carries the film for her performance. You know, she has the energy to keep it running, and it's commendable. So, I mean, as an actor, she proves herself capable, and she proves herself to be an interesting character just through her performance alone. And given it's such an early point in her career, this is her first big blockbuster film, basically. She had done a family film with her mother and sister, which I don't really think I'm going to dive into specifically, nor her earlier TV performances, because, you know, sometimes a role is just a role. You got to get something that'll kick you in the door. Nevertheless, it's just a shame that this is where, like, her career started from, but for the most part, I'd say it hasn't been that much of a detriment. Sure, it's not a great place to start, even the film that's basically, I want my two daughters to become actors, the movie. Like, not the best places to start. I think that was actually, like, direct-to-DVD anyway. But nevertheless, it, you know, probably gave her some fans, gave her some accreditation, because it's like, you know, it's an abomination of a film, but she's bearable, you know. It's not like she gave a terrible performance. So, you know, she showed her range. She can kind of do action, but she can do smart, she can do charming, she can be a bit eccentric and energetic. It's, you know, it's not bad. It's still pretty generic, but it's fine for the most part. I wouldn't suggest this film, though, like, at all. But I guess we'll get into the good and bad qualities of her films later on and whatever. So, yeah. Anyway, I guess on to better... Oh, shit. I guess not on to better things. Let's take a look at the next film, shall we? Over there. Dirty Grandpa from 2016. I feel like the lighting is exceptionally harsh on my face, but that's okay. Doesn't really matter. Dirty fucking Grandpa. My God, do I wanna really dive into this one? Like, realistically, if I can go on my Letterboxd. Let's give myself a little bit of a review. I reviewed this film back in 2019. It has been 4 long, arduous years. And I gave it 2 stars, so there's not too much praise there. Who directed this? Dan Mazer, who directed Home Sweet Home Alone, and not much else of note. Producer for a couple of films. A lot of films with Borat in it. Or the guy who plays Borat. Nevertheless, Dirty Grandpa from 2016. Like Vampire Academy, it's not worth one's time. I have seen this film enough times that choosing to forget it works the best for me. I've genuinely watched this twice. I watched it a few years back. It was on TV, and it was just terrible. And I decided to rewatch it for my Aubrey Plaza review. It was a struggle, to say the least. Not a worse film, surprisingly. I mean, if you want to see Aubrey Plaza be sexy and whatnot, sure, why not? But then you also have to combat that with Robert De Niro being sexy. And it's kind of a bit weird. Like, this isn't like that Stardust film where it's kind of fun. It's just awkward. But we're obviously not talking about those two here. From memory, she's the escape from college modern hippie type that everyone falls in love with because they both like photography or something. I don't know, artistic kind of hippie. What's the modern word for hippie that I wrote down? Hipster. More like a hipster. They're in like a traveling van and shit. I don't know. They like knew each other from high school, I think. She's the breath of fresh air character that Efron needs to realize that he can be more than what he is, aka basically what his dirty grandpa has been telling him during the whole duration of the film. I reviewed this film in more detail with my Aubrey Plaza review, so you can check it out there, but I'd suggest watching that video. I just wouldn't suggest watching this film. It's one of those things, again, where this is a clear point in her career where it's like, she can play this kind of cutesy romantic character. She doesn't always need the most development, just a single like quirk that outside of her being attractive and nice, there's something that makes her connective with the main character, in this case Zac Efron's character, and them both being hipsterish types who like, her being a hipsterish type who likes photography or some kind of art, and he's like, I connect with that because my values are very 2D, I guess. nevertheless, not a bad performance from her, but it's one that you would see later in her films as well, and realistically, you don't have to watch this to experience anything with her. She's not in that much of the film anyway. Talking about a film that she's not in that much of. Why him? Why? Why does this have to have that one guy? And oh no, I'm talking about the wrong film. You know what? I'm just going to talk about why him, because in terms of how my reviews are going, this is not the next film that came out in her career, but it basically came out the same year as Everybody Wants Some. So I want to talk about this one first, because I was able to make that context connect through the clips there. Does it matter? No. But the next one will. So, Why Him is a 2016 film. What do I have to say about this? My goodness gracious. It is directed by John Hamburg, who is of other fames, such as Nothing Interesting. I gave this film 1.5 stars. Thank you, Disney Plus, for allowing me to watch this in 4K. Who'd have thought it? Not a film I would have expected to see in 4K. Yeah, this is one of those kind of ugly films where you get James Franco in it, and that's not always a good sign. Then you get, like, Elon Musk and Tobuscus. Anyway, what do I have to say about this god-awful film? Zoe's not that... She's not in it that much. Really, really notable. Like, this is one of those perfect avoid-at-all-cost kind of movies, even if you're a fan of Zoe. It's not worth your time. Similar to Dirty Grandpa, which of course I chose not to rewatch, she's very one-note, and the film focuses on the male leads, of which Bryan Cranston isn't a very likable character, and neither is James Franco. Zoe plays more of a template of a woman who has moved from her parents to study in a different state, California. I think they went from, like, Massachusetts or Minnesota, one of those places. I think Minnesota. And she dates a tech millionaire who her parents have to, learn to like. It's very much in the vein of Meet the Fockers, but with a less interesting cast and attempt at comedy. I wouldn't recommend this for anyone, especially for Zoey Deutch fans. Even for Bryan Cranston fans, don't do this to yourself. It's atrocious. She's just not present enough to warrant a viewing. Yeah, Zoe's just not very present in this film to warrant a viewing. I'd say of the probably... Let's say it's an hour and a half runtime. She maybe gets 15 minutes of screen time. Maybe? Probably? 20 minutes? Not that much. She's probably in more of Dirty Grandpa, which is, I'd probably say, a better film. So, better performance from her for sure. Better film. Sure, why not? I could say that. What can I say about her performance, though? She doesn't feel like she's there to play... something revolutionary. She's just a pretty face that can just play a character, and that's very basic. She's able to argue with her dad I'm not even really convinced of the romance between her and James Franco's character, I'll be completely honest. They don't really try to, develop their romance at all. They kind of do by the end of the film. That's just because he wants to propose, and she's just you don't have to do that. We can just date. It's a very male-centric film. The mother gets more of a character than she does. And she's on the poster. She's over there on the poster. I'm assuming it's up there. But yeah, 1.5 films. I wouldn't suggest it. Let's move on. Let's move on to some good stuff, alright? Let's just... Right. So, Everybody Wants Some, this one I was referring to earlier. Classic film. Pretty fun. One of those classic Richard Linklater films where it's just everybody's hanging out. They're all having fun. Why not? It's more of a hangout with the boys kind of film, but that's not always a bad thing. There are a lot of films like that. Magic Mike XXL does the same kind of thing, just in a different style. So, Everybody Wants Some from 2016. It's a Richard Linklater film. I gave it, if I'm not wrong, I gave it 4.5 stars. Boy, that's a hell of a topper, isn't it? This is probably my favorite film that Zoe is in, despite it not really being a her film. She's on the front cover. She's on the back cover too. Very nice. She plays Beverly, a girl who our protagonist Jake falls for pretty early in the film. However, she only shows up sporadically until the final 45 minutes of the film, which seems weird. It's like, oh, she's only in the last 45 minutes, you don't really need to watch it. But it's not about her, it's not about the romance. The romance is like a kicker that tops it off nicely, like cherry on top. It's more about his experience, because he's going to college, and hanging out with all these other baseball players who are at the top of their game, and kind of getting the feel for what the place is like, who the people are like, and he just happens to have her on his mind because she's one of the first people who pays him a compliment. Pretty simply. That being said, this 45 minutes allows the film to flesh out enough of her character, but it also allows for the two to gain more of a connection, and like in any Linklater film, the chemistry's there. This is more of a naturalistic performance, much like in Linklater's other films, but she does at one stage dress up as Alice from Alice in Wonderland at a dress-up party, so she has fun playing as that character. She doesn't actually play as Alice, but it's more or less she's an actress. She's playing Alice, and it's a dating show. But it's like one of those blind dating shows where like you got the other three people on the side. I don't know why I'm doing that. If I was her, they'd be on my left, with like a sheet in between. And you had the Mad Hatter and the Red Queen and the rabbit. So, yeah, and obviously the love interest plays the rabbit. So, I say obviously, because he's late. Anyway, it's cute, she has some fun with it. She's quirky. What can I really pin down to a role? Again, I say it's very naturalistic. It's mostly just her and Jake having conversations. If you've seen the Before trilogy, or I'd say most of Linklater's films, they can be very conversation heavy, even if the film doesn't seem to have much of an aim. Like, what exactly is the point of the film? Where is the arc going? What is the story about? It's just about 3 days before college starts. 3 days for these guys to all, well, kind of more 2 days, for all these people to get to know each other, get to bond, you get an idea of who they are, what they're about to go through, what they've been through, to where they come to now. It's not overly dramatic, like, oh, this person has a terrible backstory. It's like, nah, he's just a player, and like, they all just want to have fun. They're all college now. A lot of people say that this is a good spiritual sequel to Dazed and Confused, because that was set in like the last day of high school. This is set technically the first day of college, but like the 2 days beforehand. It ends on the first day of college. But there's also the argument that it's a sequel in some degree, just set in the 80s, to Boyhood, which ends with the main character going to college and meeting a pretty girl, apparently. I haven't seen that one, actually. But still, it's that kind of a feel of a film, and I appreciate it. It's one of those just go in, have fun and experience it. Watch these characters just exist. And again, I like to pin these films down as like a slice of life. It's basing on this kind of a reality. It's based on a real experience that the director had gone through. It's pretty simple like that. She feels like a real person. They all feel like real characters. None of them feel like cartoons. It's just people hanging out. It's pretty fun that way, and I've always appreciated that. And she fits in quite nicely. Like, she doesn't seem cartoonish. She just seems like she's meant to. Like that cute girl that you meet in college who's in the arts group and, the art department, the theatre kid. And, she's had some experiences of her own, and you've had your experiences, and you meet, and it's cute. And hey, look, she's kind of pretty. But it's more than just that. They connect on a more than that kind of level, because it's never just about the onset of looks. It's always about, their personality. Did they actually connect? Did they flirt? Did they actually, is the connection there? Is the chemistry there? And yeah, I'd say so. But yeah, this was maybe my first film where I actually kind of fell for her as well as an actress. I'm like, hey, she's obviously attractive, but she's kind of fun. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I could imagine meeting this kind of girl. Like, I've maybe had romantic experiences with a girl like this, or almost romantic experiences with a girl like this. The kind of crush in high school, crush in, I guess, college, university kind of deal. Don't really get that in modern university, at least not from my experience. But yeah, it's pretty nice. Additionally, I guess it's noteworthy that she and Jake actually discuss Sisyphus in a scene, which becomes both a class and thematic topic in her next film. Before I Fall is a 2017 film. It is directed by Rai Russo-Young, who I think directed a couple other pictures I've seen. No, I have not. I gave it 3 stars. It's pretty good, you know. It was alright for what it is. Before I Fall is basically your teen version of Groundhog Day, which is fine. Realistically, you're like, oh no, not that tired trope of someone has to come back to life and keep dying or whatever the crap. It's not as depressing where she has to keep dying all the time. It basically only happens like twice, realistically, in terms of for the loop. First time it happens, and then the second time it happens again, just because she didn't know if it actually had happened or if it was a dream. Because I guess dreaming of a whole entire day seems realistic in a movie. Still, it is what it is. Though playing on the cliche high school beats and obvious Groundhog Day scenario, this is still a bittersweet teen drama. Deutch convincingly gives us the teen good girl in one of her final days of high school who relives the same day on repeat. She's able to shape herself as the hero, as a villain, and as a savior. I want to say hero and savior is 2 different things, because hero meaning more like a protagonist type, savior because of her actions later in the film. Through this, she shows grace and emotion in her role, pretty convincingly too. Her edgy teenage phase, though cliche, it's basically, hey, screw it, if I'm going to keep reliving this whole thing, I'm going to be mean to everyone. And there's like an immediate ramification for a lot of her actions where like she's rude to her best friends because like even if it's just her being completely honest, it's still indicative of her being rude to her best friends. And she's like immediately faced with, oh, the consequences of my actions is emotional turmoil. It's not like this is going to set her free, and she kind of realizes that, but like she perseveres and continues doing it throughout the whole day to understand the experiences and whatever, you know. That kind of thing you probably would have wanted to do in high school, where you go up to the class bully and you punch them, and you see the person you've had romantic interest for a while, and you romantically kiss them or whatever, but in a valiant way, not in a creepy, I'm just going to make out the person and kind of abuse them. I mean, like in the yay, you punched a bully, I'm going to give you a kiss kind of deal, you know, like again, romanticized. But, you know, that kind of experience, but a bit more realistic, I guess. But this phase still shows that she has strength at, you know, showcasing emotion from the factor of, hey, you know, she might be trying to portray this cruel and mean demeanor, but you can clearly see that on the inside it's still affecting her a lot. And I like that. She's not just like cutting off and devoid of emotion throughout this whole entire sequence. Like, clearly these actions, despite her being like, maybe this will be what gets me out of this loop, is, you know, not actually helping her as a person. It's a decent teen version of Groundhog Day, so as McFly says, your kids will love it. I wanted to put that in as a reference, so yeah. I mean, for the most part, I'd say, because this is probably the film that helped to make her career more notable, I think, because this is, again, one of those teen things based on a book that's probably popular among teenagers, which is fine. Especially, I'd say, teenage girls, because she's a teenage girl. It has that element to it, and it's still a nice enough film. I know I only gave it like 3 stars, but again, you still have to go through your teenage tropes, which again, is an interesting perspective to put this kind of a film in. Again, the whole Groundhog Day thing of a recurring thing. I've only seen like 4 films that have the Groundhog Day like kind of esque style. Obviously, the original Groundhog Day. You get Before I Fall, which is your teen high school drama, which is unique enough of a present of an idea. Like, imagine having a relive the exact same day of high school over and over and over again. It's really depressing. So you can see how it takes a toll on her character, but because she has to be the good-hearted, you know, hero character, she realizes that being a bad person's bad, but like also that some of her actions in the past, just in general of her being with her friends, have been indicative of being a bad person. It's not just, oh, I'm going to be rude directly to my friends. It's the fact that, oh, this whole time we've actually been rude to other people, and I'm not, I haven't been a nice person. So, yeah, that classic, oh, she has to die over and over and over again to become a good person, which is, again, Groundhog Day. They're a bad person who becomes a better person. Except she's not exactly a terrible person. She's a teenager. She just learns to become a better person, despite the factor. It just involves her dying a couple times and other people being rude and her, all that kind of stuff. Whatever Groundhog Day was, there was a Live, Die, Repeat, Edge of Tomorrow, which is the sci-fi action equivalent. I mean, it's all technically sci-fi to some degree, but more of that's like the alien invasion equivalent. And, Palm Springs, I think that's what it was called. That was also more of a romantic comedy, but it was the Lonely Island one. It's a pretty good one. So they've all been pretty good. They've all been distinctly different. Like, none of them have been a direct repeat of Groundhog Day itself. It's just, hey, take this idea of a day repeating and make it as a character building exercise. Yeah, and of course with teenagers, there's a lot to build in terms of character. And I think Deutch is able to portray that really well. Like, she doesn't come off immediately like a dislikable character. She's not like, I think it's Phil in Bill Murray's character in Groundhog Day. Like, he's like immediate, like, kind of a dick, but she isn't. But you clearly see that it's not just that, like, she doesn't personally have to be a asshole all the time. It's the factor of, like, oh, it's her and the actions that her best friends are taking, that her boyfriend is taking, and all this kind of stuff that, like, makes them be lesser people to other people, but not a generalization. It's more or less it's like, oh, they're going to bully, like, 2 or 3 people because one of them's gay and one of them looks a bit weird, general teenage girl bullying bullshit. So, you could take your moral lesson out of it of, hey, how about you just be nice to people because they go through a lot of bad shit daily, whereas you might be having all the fun in the world because you're a bully. So maybe become a better person. So, yeah, it's nice. It's got a very bittersweet ending, which sucks, but, yeah, still, it is what it is. What's our next film? Our next film is a classic rom-com, romantic comedy. This is 2018's Set It Up, which is directed by Claire Scanlon. I don't know any of the other films that she's directed, but she did direct the Kimmy Schmidt movie, which I believe is like one of those choose-your-own-adventure story things for Netflix. So that's interesting. I think she was a big TV director. She'd done episodes of Kimmy Schmidt and some other shows as well, so that's not too bad. I gave the film 3.5 stars. Toasty. So, Set It Up shows that Deutch can play the perfect cutesy love interest alongside Glenn Powell. And honestly, is there really anything else to say? Like, basically, is there anything else to say? They play good-hearted characters who work together to manipulate their bosses into a romance so that they can get time off work to focus on their own lives, because being assistants for these big heads means little time for them to actually have a life of their own. Hijinks ensue and they fall in love. It's pretty simple, but it's cute and has some surprisingly funny moments. Occasionally some with Pete Davidson of all people. Well, I know a lot of people dislike him, but he's only in like 5 minutes of the movie and he plays like the gay roommate. And he has some good scenes. He doesn't like overstep his boundaries, or his presence doesn't come over as overbearing, which is like probably good Pete Davidson in terms of film roles. I haven't seen one where he's in the film for like longer than half an hour, and I've seen 3 movies that he's in, so there you go. She definitely has the ability to make herself into a character that feels like they've always lived and breathed in the city that the film is set in, though I guess being a New Yorker isn't exactly the hardest thing to pull off, but she feels like a New Yorker, This is probably her best rom-com, though it's not exactly award-winning stuff. And again, in terms of her as a character, I think this is where most people have come to really like her as an actor, because she just plays on that trope of she can be the cutesy but smart girl that, you'd want to introduce to your mum, probably. I don't know. I don't know if she has any, any of the characters have like sexual kinks. So if that's your kind of thing, we're all about personality here. Looks and personality in this case. Sorry about your sex kinks, kids. It's not that kind of movie. But yeah, it's just, it's nice. It's a fun movie. I enjoyed it. She's fun to watch. I think this is what I'd probably put down at the basis of most of her films, if not all of her films, is that whenever she's there, she's just fun to watch. Like, she's not always like the main attraction of the film, like this being like a good film that has, you got Glenn Powell, you got Lucy Liu, you've got a good cast, and they all play quite well together anyway. Like, even someone like Pete Davidson, who's only in the film for a couple of minutes, they just all feel kind of like livable characters, not to the degree of realism that someone like Linklater will pull out, but more of a rom-com realism. But it's a step above from most of like your Hallmark shit where everything's kind of cliche and unbearable, or just so much formulaic of the same shit that it's just, ugh. At least in these films that she's been in that are rom-coms, they're all obviously formulaic, but they've got some interesting quirks to them. Usually it's a character dynamic, usually maybe it's a narrative dynamic. In this case, I'd say it's both. Like, I haven't really seen this kind of a rom-com before, but they even reference in the film The Parent Trap, which isn't exactly the same kind of situation, but kind of is. But, it's not like it's the same situation of, oh, we're going to set up our parents so that we can go off and get laid. That's not what happens in The Parent Trap. So, it's just fine. It's on Netflix. It's easy to watch. It's like an hour and a bit, hour and a half-ish. They're usually always an hour and a half. I think this one's a bit longer than an hour and a half. It's like maybe an hour and 45. Wow. It's actually, it's an hour and 45, yeah, because it's 105 minutes long. I don't know. It's cute. She plays Harper Moore. There you go. There are character names. They're just not always the most interesting character names. And of course, then we jump into where she starts becoming an actor. Maybe? I don't know. I watched Buffaloed from 2019. This is directed by... She produced this one as well. Directed by Tanya Wexler, who has not directed anything I've heard of outside of Jolt, which is a Kate Beckinsale action film, which I don't know if that would be any good. It's on my Amazon watch list, but I'm probably not going to watch it. I've actually seen this film twice. I gave it 3 stars. She plays Rose Hathaway. No, that's the wrong film. What the crap? She plays Peg Dahl. She's the only character who actually gets a surname in this film, outside of the younger version of herself. And okay, there's a few people who get surnames, but for the main cast, she's like one of the only person. She has a mother and brother in the film, so they get surnames, sure. But they're all referred to as their surnames, as their first names. Buffaloed is a 2019 film. This is a rewatch because I had basically forgotten what happened in this film, and I can kind of see why. Though it's an interesting film and could easily be seen as a discount Wolf of Wall Street or, The Big Short, but it's relatively just as relevant, Deutch is a lot more cartoonish as a character, which I imagine is because you have to cram a good portion of time into 90 minutes, and, you don't really want to make it boring. You got to have some kind of cartoonish element to it. I mean, again, think of Wolf of Wall Street and how, despite it being a 3-hour film, think of the type of performance that we're getting from Leonardo DiCaprio. He's not exactly the most realistic kind of person. Everything about it is extravagant to the extreme. She's just, in this case, for Buffaloed, just cartoonish, which I think is fine, realistically. It's a film that goes for a form of realism, but more of a cartoonish pizzazz to keep you entertained, just in case the topic of finance is maybe a bit of a snooze fest. And her character and performance reflects that well. Though being a fun role to watch, I don't connect well with her character, as the film comes off as, more of a moral lesson about greed and debt than a, memorable tale. Like, I don't care much for her character, for the romance, for her... I mean, I care enough for the family that she's got, because we have to follow them throughout the whole entire film, but it's like, it's basically just watching a con artist do stuff, and it's like, yeah, it's fine, I guess, It's very cartoonish, in her performance, which I don't say that is a bad thing. Again, it makes the film pop, you know, it gives it that extra oomph. Otherwise, I'd say it's pretty forgettable. Again, this is the second time I'd seen it, and I'd forgotten most of what had happened in the film. It's kind of, it's generic, but less so than like, oh, it's not generic. It's actually, I guess it kind of is, because now you're looking at the biopic formula, you know, the biopic, whereas something like, because I believe it's based on a true story. Whereas something like, you know, a rom-com, like Set It Up, is like, that has a distinction to it because it's fiction, but despite it being a cliche, you know, narrative of, oh, it's a rom-com, this one is, it's a biopic, you know? Your hero is basically an anti-hero because tax evasion and fraud and shit. It's not really tax evasion, it's more of, she's a debt collector. And, you know, because Buffalo is the biggest debt collecting city in the world or whatever. I don't know. Or at least in America. And, you know, they like their stories about finance, I guess. I don't know. I feel like The Big Short and Wolf of Wall Street did well because they were over the top in terms of their content, in terms of their content, as well as in terms of the performances. I haven't seen The Big Short. I don't really care to. You know, I don't even care that much for The Wolf of Wall Street. It's a good film, but it's like, I don't know. Sure, I guess. But yeah, I think she does play an interesting character in the film because, again, she does do something completely different than what she's done in any previous film that I've seen of hers. She's not this like level of cartoonish in any other film, so it's like, you know, good, but it's also like, it just feels like it's an excuse to make the film more interesting. Oh, if she plays a bit of an over-the-top character because she's a bit of an outlier, she's a bit different than people, then, I mean, sure, I guess. I mean, even kind of Jai Courtney feels like he's playing it up a little, but he's meant to be like this debt collector mob boss, so it's like, sure, I guess. You know, he's got a bit of it to it, he's even got the whole fake tan and everything, and it's like, yeah, but he plays it lesser to an extent because, I mean, he's meant to feel threatening, and he does to some degree, whereas she doesn't. She just feels like someone who's just desperate for everything to hopefully work out. But yeah, so it's not a bad role. It's probably one of the better roles. It's just not a very interesting film, I think. So there's that. But then we get into a very fun role of hers. Let's change the angle a little because I'm a bit tired of standing in the same spot. Zombieland Double Tap. I'm going to actually stand over here. Zombieland Double Tap is a 2019 film. It is directed by Ruben Fleischer, who directed Venom, and the original Zombieland, and Uncharted. Boy, oh boy, what a fun spaghetti of films that is. So, Zombieland Double Tap is a 2019 film. I gave it 3 stars. It's fine. It's okay. Zoe plays Madison, a welcome character in a dry sequel who honestly seems to be the only person having fun. Honestly, I'm sure most people hated her character in this, which I initially did upon my first viewing, but at least the first half of the first viewing, because she comes in, your cliche dumb blonde character, and it's just like, oh god, are you kidding me? They're going to try and make this funny? But then something happens to her character, and she shows up kind of as a surprise later on, and it's suddenly I'm like, oh my god, this film was terrible when she was gone. Thank God she's back. It makes it very amusing, and I've seen this film 2.5 times now, because I watched half of it on Foxtel like 2 years ago or something, because it was just on, and I couldn't really be bothered turning the TV off or whatever, but this time I rewatched it on my 4K, and it was fine, I guess. Deutch is quite funny in this film, which says a lot given that no one else really is. I mean, Woody Harrelson is fine, I guess, but I mean, he playing the exact same character he played 10 years earlier, and sure, it worked 10 years ago, well, 10 years prior to this film's release, but this time around it's kind of a bit tiresome, you know? She also plays a character type I haven't seen from her. She plays the dumb blonde whose dumbness is an attribute over a detriment to her surviving in her surroundings. It's a zombie apocalypse. Her character's whole existence is how did she survive this long, and that's clearly the long-running joke with her character. Yet I didn't get tired of it even on my second and a half viewing. Either way, this is a pretty fun performance from her, and in all honesty, upon first watch, the film is pretty fun as well. Like most standard comedy films, they can be pretty fun upon first watch, but where the film gets stale quickly, and even upon rewatch, exceptionally quickly, she doesn't. She's a breath of fresh air, and I really enjoyed her performance in the film. I think this was the second film that made me like really notable of her as an actor because again, when you have a character that just seems more out there than everyone else is, you know, it's like, oh, we're hanging out with all our old friends again, but they all seem old and tired. And then you got this like newbie who's like, yo, what up? I'm D'Artagnan. I'm gonna fucking kill everyone else while you Three Musketeers go and have a beer because you're retired. I don't know. Is that what happens in the Four Musketeers? Anyway, we're not talking about that. I haven't seen it. But yeah, I think Zombieland 2, again, it's a very simple character role. She plays that kind of a cliched role, but she has just a nice energy to it where it feels very millennial in a way, which I think is meant to be the point. Like she's even comes up with in the film, oh, basically the idea for Uber of a ride-sharing platform, but everyone there laughs like, haha, we're all in our 30s. That's a dumb idea, because we don't have anything inventive left in our body. Much like the film, you know, it's like it invented her role as a funny joke, and then was like, oh, we gotta bring her back, and now she's gotta still be funny, but then it's like, but we got to try and make everyone else as funny as she is, and clearly that's not going to happen because by this stage everyone else is just tired of being in this film, where she is like, oh, I had a break and I came back and I'm even more energized, you know, like when someone comes back from like having a good coke break and then like, fuck yeah, let's do this shit. I don't know that from experience, but I imagine that's what it would give you, you know, just that extra kick in the nuts. Yeah, she's funny. She's basically adorable. I really like her in the film. It just sucks that it's such a boring fucking movie. But yeah, I don't know. I definitely say that this is one of her better roles to check out. Again, kind of like cartoonish. Not as cartoonish like in Buffaloed. In Buffaloed, she's like, I'm a smart person, but I'm also cartoonish because of like, I have to be over the top. Whereas in this one, she's just a funny person. Again, a lot of people I can imagine would be annoyed by her character because, again, the ditzy dumb blonde. But I think, again, when she comes back later in the film, you know, because she's not there all the time, it's not over the top, it's not consistent, it doesn't, like, degrade the character or degrade the film. It degrades the film when she leaves, sure, but, like, if she was there on a constant, I feel like that would be more annoying, but because she isn't, she's like, oh, welcome back, just come back, please, oh my god, we're begging you. So, you know, it's pretty fun. Yeah, and, I guess then we get to talk about her latest roles in 2022. Because it's 2023 now. So yes, her latest slate of films start, and of course end, in 2022 with The Outfit, which was a first-time directorial film, so directorial debut, of, what's his name? Graham Moore. It also happens to star Mark Rylance in a very nice role, and Dylan O'Brien, who also is in the next film that Zoe is in. So, yeah, this came out at the very start of 2022. I hadn't heard of it until, of all things, Chris Duckman's 2022 Best Films of the Year list. I hadn't heard of it. I don't even know if it got a theatrical release here in Australia, and so I ended up renting it online because I've had to do that with, well, I mean, the next three options at least I had Disney Plus and Amazon for not okay and something at Tiffany's, so there's that. But yeah, I literally just finished watching the film. I know, weird, between cuts, how do they do that? Watched the last two films, in fact. So this would be an off the cuff review. This was a really nice film. I gave it 4.5 stars, probably one of the best films that had come out last year that I'd seen. it's just a very tight film. It's simply structured. It's a single location kind of film, and it utilizes it really nicely. It's set in Chicago, and I believe the late 50s. It's just a really sleek film. It's got a good score, some really tense sequences, some really interesting laugh out loud moments. So yeah, I don't know. I'd check it out for just that alone. Zoe's part in it. She is the receptionist. Does she have a character name? She does. I'm never good with character names. That's a flaw in me. She plays Mabel. She's lived in Chicago her whole life. She has the accent and all, and honestly, she's pretty good at accents. Got to give her props there. A lot of American actors do not get props for doing other accents, even if they are of just other places in America. Like I note that she is pretty good at living and breathing as the New York character, but I'm pretty sure she probably was she born in New York? You know, it's probably, again, noteworthy to say. Oh, she's from LA, of course. She's from LA, so she can do a good New York accent at least, and a good Chicago accent. And she's really nice in this one. Like, she's in kind of the first third and the last third, kind of. It jumbles between. But again, she plays a receptionist. It all seems very coy and whatever. She all seems very normal and natural. She doesn't like the fact that the mob are using this place as like their hideout for letters and shit. And yeah, she's the character with like the dreams, the aspirations. I want to go to London. I want to go to Paris. She speaks French at one point. There's just a lot of great nuances with her character. I think 2022 is definitely like been a good year for her. Obviously, I'll touch on her romantic comedy at the end of this, but Not Okay. I'm very interested about talking about. I can't say too much about the outfit. It's a very good film. I think she's very good in it. I think everybody's very good in it. Like, convincingly good. The thing is that there's a couple of twists in the film, and I don't want to ruin the film. So what I'll say is, for the part that she plays, it's a very significant role. I kind of expected something to happen with her role, like she'd have more importance than it seems, and she definitely did. But there are multiple twists in this movie, which is even better. Hence the laugh out loud nature to it. There's just some really funny twists, but like not funny because they're bad, funny because it's like, oh fuck, I did not see that coming. And she's able to play like both sides of the coin. It's good. She's very good in this one. It's basically a spy thriller, and she's pretty darn good at it. So I'd like to see her in another spy kind of role. Like, I think she could pull it off, especially like say like an undercover agent kind of deal. It all screams out of this film. But like, yeah, no, she could do something really cool after this kind of a role, and it's nice to see her do something different. Because you don't want to stick yourself in a one particular role. Like, she's not just there as, like, sure, she's the cute, attractive receptionist, whatever. The main guy wants, like, sees her as maybe someone who can take up the role as, and maybe you can be the next cutter, you know, you can learn from what I know and whatever. I can pass down my knowledge, but she clearly has aspirations to do other things, so she's not just a pretty face. She has, you know, motivations to do other stuff. She has places she wants to go. So she plays a very interesting character in a very interesting film, and I definitely recommend watching it. Boy. Then we get to a very interesting role. Maybe, arguably her best role, I think. Not my favorite of hers, because again, I really like her as Madison. I really like her in Everybody Wants Some. But of course, we've got to talk about Not Okay. Not Okay was, for some reason, because I've been following her on Instagram, whatever, for a while now. And the fact that I never even saw her talking about the outfit, she might have made a post about it. Like, it's like, I feel like that's something you'd want to post more about. I just didn't see anything. Maybe I wasn't following her by that stage in the year. I can't recall. But Not Okay came about, and that was a very, I'd say, more divisive movie. It's got a lot of mixed reviews online. But what do I have to say about it? I feel like I might have actually written down something decent to reiterate. Not Okay. is a satire on modern internet culture, with Zoey playing Danny, a girl who wants to be noticed, who wants to be a writer, and who wants to be important, but through one lie of her being in Paris, tumbles into a greater lie that she survived the terrorist attack. So the satire is that she's not a good person, and I actually like the film starts with a, you know how a lot of modern films will, especially on streaming services, will put in a notation at the start saying, it has, maybe it's a sensitive topic, maybe it's flashing strobe lighting or whatever. It actually did say it has a strobe lighting, which it does in a scene. But it actually says, and I kind of blinked and missed it, but then realized what it was saying, that it features an unlikable female protagonist, which the director actually put in on purpose because during test audiences, they didn't understand why they would want to root for a unlikable female protagonist. So the director thought, maybe if I put in this extra line at the start, this little warning tag that, this is what you're going to be getting, as if she'd be a good person to begin with. Self-obsessed millennial type and whatever. I can partially relate, but not to that distinction. I guess being American is a whole different kind of cup of tea. So anyway, where the film could have taken the role of just focusing on her and eventually shaming her and other internet liars about social matters, instead it opens Danny's world to the other traumas of society. In this case, school shootings and overall mass violence and how it affects people. Where the satire pokes fun at Danny's character and people like her, the film also balances this with the reality of these awful situations. And I don't think I'll just keep going. Zoey is really effective in the role, with this maybe being her best role to date, and I genuinely think it's probably her best performance in a film to date. She's able to play this girl who can seem innocent enough yet is lying through her teeth. She's able to show how her guilt slowly builds in the film until her eventual confession. Not really a spoiler, it's bound to fucking happen. It literally tells you at the start of the film that she gets exposed at some stage. And even after that, she's able to humanize a person that is shamed by society, as in Zoey is able to humanize her own character. I think Zoey does this well as a girl who wants it all but then gets in too over her head, who makes dumb decisions for her own self-gain, but also who is a person who can learn and understand what she's done wrong, and even if she can't fix her mistakes, she can learn to listen and understand what she has done. It's a very good film and a very good performance from Zoey, who at times remarkably looks like a young Rose Byrne. It kept putting me off. I was like watching the film thinking, she looks like someone else. Who does she look like? She looks like someone who's like maybe 20 years older than her. She does. She just in some scenes looks like Rose Byrne. She's an Australian actress. It's uncanny, the resemblance at times. It's mostly the eyebrows and kind of like the cheekbones. Sometimes because she's got like this, I believe, like, it's not bangs. She's not a fringe. She's like dyed part of her hair at the front. I don't have long hair, so I can't really showcase. I think it's on the poster at least. She's dyed part of her hair yellow, and it's like it kind of gives it a framing for her face, especially when she wears hats in the film, and it's like she just looks like Rose Byrne. But yeah, this one is a very tough. I feel like it would be a tough subject of a film for people, especially because school shootings, terrorist attacks, all that kind of stuff, and it's exceptionally fucked up. But the thing is, it's not uncomfortable to watch in the film. A lot of people, review-wise, have given, say, like, oh, this film gives me secondhand embarrassment, that kind of stuff. It's like, alright, you do you, I was able to delineate myself from that because for me, when I'm watching a satire, sometimes there's enough of an emphasis on the reality of something, and the satire can maybe be overshadowed by that. But I think, for me, the satire worked effectively in this film to a point where it wasn't. The satire was mostly focused on her character. She makes a best friend who is really good in the film, who's the character called Rowan. Quinn Shepherd. I should note, Quinn Shepherd directed this. Mia Isaac plays Rowan Aldrin. She's really fucking good. She's basically, literally the opposite half of like where Danny's this character who is a self-obsessed millennial type who wants to be, I wouldn't exactly say rich and famous, but she just wants to be noticed and to be of importance to the people around her. She wants to be included. Like, in one of the opening scenes, she's talking about how she dislikes the fact that she didn't experience 9/11. Like, that's a pretty bold statement, because she's saying how, oh, I was on a cruise with my family. We didn't know until we got back. I didn't know anyone who died in it, so I didn't have any of that trauma that my generation deals with. And it's like, so she's felt left out this whole time. So she tries to flirt with a guy who's a colleague, who's an influencer, played by Dylan O'Brien, and she ends up lying, saying that she's going to go to Paris for a writing convention thingy, a writing escape thing. And while she's lying about it, because she's also she as a wannabe writer, but she's also like a photo editor, so she knows how to use Photoshop really well, which I'm surprised people didn't catch on much earlier, but they make a point later in the film that people really don't fact check much these days, which I can appreciate that. So she's making it seem like she's in Paris, and then, oh, whoopsie, a terrorist attack happens. It's very interesting. Of course, like, I'd seen the trailer to some degree. I knew that this was going to happen. It didn't make me interested to watch the film, because I don't like watching films that have this kind of social topic. I like to use films as a form of escapism. I don't always like to see representations of modern things that are happening. It's more or less on me thing, you know, it's my particular thing. But the thing is, I still watch films like that. It's not like I completely shy away. I'm like, no, I don't want to watch films that are about the Me Too movement or about Black Lives Matter. I don't want to watch that kind of crap. It's like, no, I'm more than happy to. I respect films that have been made like that. But it's just a factor of, like, it's more of all general kind of social issues. Like, sorry about that. Dogs are barking at something outside. You know, pitch black, and they start barking. So what was I saying? Yeah. Social movement movies. You know? I don't always like to be uncomfortable during a movie. I know I like to watch horror films, but when it comes to social commentary kind of horror films, it's a bit different. Nevertheless, I watch it. It happens. But this one, again, the satire, I think, has a different appeal to it, because it's like, it's not like it classes itself on Disney Plus as a comedy. And for the most part, it's like, I mean, I could see how people could find this funny, because, of course, she's a bad person. I'm going to be laughing, I guess, at her. Maybe? I don't know. It's like, it's such a serious thing, especially when she befriends someone who has survived a school shooting. It's like, and then that person, you see a lot of stuff from their perspective as well, especially when they're in school and there's a school shooting alarm, like, hey, this is just a drill, and everyone immediately looks at her like, oh, you've survived one of these, you've dealt with one of these situations, what are you going to do? And she's like, starts to have a fucking panic attack, because this shit sucks. You know, trauma isn't great. And the fact that, you know, it villainizes our protagonist more. You know, I don't really think she's a protagonist, is she? She's the main character, at least. So, I mean, antagonist, yeah, probably. So, the fact that it emphasizes that, it's emphasizing that, where it's like, she's kind of got this cartoonish distortion of the world. She's realized immediately, like, this is bad, but I can use this. Like, that's pretty bad. She's using it for her own gain, and of course it bites her in the ass. But yeah, it has a chapter cards, especially in like I think it's like chapter 8, where it emphasizes that she doesn't get a redemption arc, and I'm like, that's when I actually found the satire to be real cutting edge, because I'm like, good. That's where, like, the satire hits peak for me, because it's like, yeah, she's such a bad person, she gets no redemption, it all fucking crashes and burns, and it's great. And that whole final act, really nicely done. And she's just really good in the role. She's believably a self-absorbed asshole who is trying to be nice and trying to do the right thing, but clearly all the motivations and stuff are completely misguided. And even by the end of it, she has some kind of a change of perspective. But yeah, I think she does a bloody good job. So yeah, I think it's very worth watching. I gave it 4 stars. I think it was very entertaining. Very good film. I'm interested to potentially watch it again. I don't know, but yeah, I definitely think it's her best role. Her most topical film to date, for sure. And I mean, come on, she cut out 3 films in 1 year. The outfit, which, sure, she's not in too much of, but what she does, it's relevant and amazing. She's in all of Not Okay, and then she's in our next film for a lot of that as well. So, let's talk about that. Something from Tiffany's is a 2022 film. It is directed by, let's take a look, Daryl Wine, who directed a bunch of films that I've never heard of. Fair enough. This is another one of those classic 90-minute rom-coms that you feel like would be a Hallmark film. It's even set at Christmas. Oh my god. It seems inspired enough by Breakfast at Tiffany's, except this time it's just something from Tiffany's. Is there a Tiffany's cinematic universe? Because this film doesn't reference Breakfast at Tiffany's. Maybe if they had, a white guy pretending to be an Asian guy, maybe that would be a good callback. But clearly it's not trying to reference it, and it's not... It's interesting. It's not trying to, glamorize the brand of Tiffany's. It's just... That's where, the meet-cute happens, but not even really. It's... And I gotta kind of go into the plot a little bit. I don't really need to, but our main character is actually, I wouldn't even pin that. She's Rachel Meyer. I wouldn't say she's the main character. She kind of is, but not really. You've also got Kendrick Sampson as Ethan Green, and he goes shopping with his daughter to buy an engagement ring for his girlfriend. And who you have? Gary Wilson, played by Ray Nicholson, happens to be buying some earrings for his girlfriend, who is played by Zoey Deutch. And of course, he gets hit by a car, and Ethan goes over to make sure he's alright. The ambulance happens to be around the corner, bloody convenient. And so he goes to grab his bag from Tiffany's, and he happens to grab the wrong bag, because they're fucking identical. It's a Christmas gift. He gives it to his partner, just his girlfriend, and he expects it to be an engagement ring, and it isn't. It is a pair of earrings. And so, of course, Zoey Deutch gets an engagement ring, and her boyfriend, who's been in a coma, who, not comatose, but has amnesia from that event, didn't realize that he'd bought an engagement ring, and even went through the finances later and realized he definitely did not buy an engagement ring, but hey, look, here we are. Now, of course, this isn't the immediate setup. There's an in-between where Ethan and his daughter go to see if the guy's alright, and they happen to meet Zoey Deutch's character, and they learn about her, and there's clearly a connection there pretty quickly. It's kind of like, oh, these two were clearly made for each other, whereas her and her boyfriend, maybe not so much, and him and his girlfriend, definitely not so much. For an 87-minute film, I gave it 3 stars. It's a promising, yet still generic rom-com, but its cast and fresh-ish plot keeps it cooking as the romantic dough rises to a nice degree, despite a slightly undercooked ending. Yes, that was a pun. She's a baker. Deutch is cute in the role and shows herself to be the modern queen of rom-coms. Honestly, I can see her continuing this streak of more than bearable modern rom-coms, and I don't know how often I'd tune in, but I'd be interested, I guess. I obviously would like to see more from her as an actor, and she's definitely shown herself to be a capable actor. But in terms of the rom-com stuff, she's very easy to be cute, there's not much else to say sometimes, she's able to play a very adorable and very interesting character. Probably not the most interesting character, but someone who, if you were in the same rom-com situation, sure, you'd fall for her too, It just is what it is. She knows how to pull that off pretty easily. She's done it in a few films now. In fact, I'd say that's her strongest attribute as an actor, that she can do that kind of type. But it's not exactly like an archetype for a character, she's going to be designated to just rom-coms her whole life, because clearly she's done other roles where she's played very similar characters, or maybe not very similar characters, but characters who have that same similar grounding element. Oh, she's a cute, smart, fun character. She happens to have maybe some strength, or maybe she's a photographer, or maybe she's in college and she's an actor. She's always got something else that makes her character pop a bit more throughout each film. But Yeah, so I wouldn't pin this down to being a bad film in all of its points. I wouldn't say it's her strongest romantic comedy, though. I think Set It Up is a more interesting film because all of the characters are interesting. It's not just the lead two, and to be fair, this has some fun side characters. So, props to them, especially Jojo T. Gibbs as Terry Blake. Really liked her in this movie. So I guess we continue this into part two. What are her best roles? Let's take a look. So, Zoe's best roles, her worst roles. It's a considerable difference because realistically, I wouldn't say she has any bad roles per se. Like, if you're looking at a utilization of her as an actor, then stay away from Why Him and, arguably Vampire Academy as well. Mostly because she was much more new to the game, and despite her still being, a good actor, it's not a good enough film to really waste your time with, realistically. And then you get Dirty Grandpa, which I think is a decent start. Like, it shows, for the most part, a character that she kind of continues to play throughout most of her films. Not all of them, of course. You get a lot of difference with, especially stuff post-2018. Before I Fall is definitely an interesting character, and it's an interesting film altogether, so I definitely would qualify that as a worthwhile watch in terms of her as an actor and as a film itself. What else do we have? I'm trying to rummage this all off the top of my head, but I don't have the best memory. Everybody Wants Some is definitely one that I would just recommend in general. She's pretty good in it. Like, I don't think there's any disqualifying factors about that film, despite the fact that she's not in the majority of the run of the film. But I don't mind that, because it's not a film about her. It's a film about Jake, and how, he's part of this baseball team, and he's just gotten to college. He's just graduated high school the year before. He was top of his team, and now he's got this reality of, oh, this is the kind of world I have to live in and adapt to. And, does he want to be the kind of people that is a bit, well, I wouldn't exactly say misogynistic, but at the same time, a little bit. But, he wants to stay true to himself, and so it's more about that, and she happens to be a big factor in that, which I really like. Set It Up is probably her best rom-com, so if you want to see her being in a good rom-com, you get a good cast, an interesting story. It's a decent use of an hour and a half, hour and 45. So, and I saw it on Netflix, so it wasn't a waste of my time. I enjoyed it. I think she's pretty good in that one. If you're looking for at least a good rom-com, definitely her best one. I'd argue that Everybody Wants Some is arguably as well kind of a romantic comedy, but it's not romantic comedy in the tropes of a romantic comedy. There just happens to be romance and there happens to be comedy. It's more of a, I don't even know if it's a drama film. It's just a slice of life, which feels to me like its own category, which has an adaptation of each thing. It has some drama, it has some action, it has some comedy, it has some old romance and other stuff. Buffaloed is definitely an interesting character. I don't think it's a particularly amazing film. I don't care that much for it particularly, but I think she does play an interesting character, so it gives you a different perspective of what she can do. I'd recommend it, at least for her. Like, she is the main character, so that's, like, not just if she's a side character, so you can probably skip it, but she's great. No, in this case, I'd say, like, it's like the opposite of Zombieland. Not really, actually, they're both pretty, I'd say probably Buffalo might be worse of a film. It's really hard to say. It depends. They have different qualifying elements. But in this case, Buffaloed, her being the main character, definitely want checking out just for her performance alone. Judy Greer is still good in it. Most of the cast is still pretty damn good in it. It's just the film, to me personally, is not a very interesting film. But it's good enough I watched it twice and I didn't want to turn it off. So, I guess interesting in the degree of whether it's forgettable or not. Is it a decent hour and a half of your time that you can just kind of put something on, whatever, and enjoy? Then sure, why not? And you don't have to think too hard about it too, because everything's pretty well explained to you. Like, she narrates stuff, she looks at the camera and talks to you, and not a lot of the time, it's not over the top, it's not too much. It's a decent amount. And of course, then we get Zombieland Double Tap, where I'd say she's the best part of the film. She's very funny. She's very just. She has so much life in her, and I like the character that she plays. It's something different that she hasn't done before. She's the sarcastic, not exactly sarcastic, just the ditzy dumb blonde who learns sarcasm, which I like. She actually changes over the course of the film. She's just very oblivious and very dumb, but that's so much fun. The film itself is, on a first time viewing, perfectly fine. If you're a big fan of the first film, then you might also really, really like it. I like the first film. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I enjoy it. So, yeah, it's a fine film, and she's a good addition. So, it's a worthwhile effort. Then you've got the outfit, which, again, that's one of those, it's not her film, but she's an important character, because it's like a play. There's only a selection of characters, like, 10 to 15 characters. They all have an important role to play to some degree, and she does her role really well. I mean, I'd suggest it as a film overall, because it was a really good film, but she's also pretty darn good in it as well, so I think this is definitely the key of her. This is where she starts getting real good, so I'm really excited to see what she does next, because the outfit was really good. She is really good in it. Then, of course, you'll follow that with Not Okay, which can play people a bit off because of its topic, because it's a satire, and satire can be a bit of a tricky subject to, actually try to do, and the fact that Disney Plus advertises it as a comedy. But comedy and satire are two different branches of the same kind of, same tree. They're similar in the fact that they're meant to be comedic, but it depends on if you're going for dry comedy or whatever, and in this case it's satirical comedy, and that's not exactly the most laugh out loud thing. Like, I've watched shows and movies that are laugh out loud because they're satires, like mostly political satires, but then you get stuff like this, and it's like, it's a social satire, and it's more or less, she's a bad character. I wouldn't exactly say you laugh at her, because again, it's more or less the commentary element that's satirical, That's, otherwise it's just watching an asshole be an asshole, but she's not exactly an asshole. But she plays a good role, and she's a very interesting character in a very interestingly made film. But yeah, for the most part, I definitely suggest this. It's probably her best performance to date. It's got a great poster as well. It's pretty good. I mean, it's on Disney Plus as well, so if you have that, it's pretty easy to watch. Yeah, so definitely her best role, I think, so far. Not my favorite of hers. I'd probably say maybe Madison in Zombieland 2 is maybe my favorite role of hers. But this one's probably her best role. Then you get something from Tiffany's, which it feels like a bit of a step back in the element of it's a rom-com. It's slightly different on the formula, so I appreciate that. And it's a Christmas thing as well, so you get the holiday spirit. Even though she does actually say that she's Jewish, which I find to be kind of funny. Like, the whole film is this whole Christmas thing, and she's fucking Jewish, and it's like, it doesn't like affect the film at all, because I'm pretty sure she's actually Jewish. So it's just interesting, so it's a decent film. You could watch it once and move on with your life. It's not as waste of a time like a Hallmark Christmas film or just a Hallmark romance film, and it doesn't feel as cheap as a Netflix original rom-com, because Set It Up isn't, I don't believe that's a Netflix original. I think it's just on Netflix. It might be a Netflix original, I'm pretty sure it isn't. Either way, this one's an Amazon one, so it's got a bit more of a quirk to it. It's fine. She's fun in it. The characters are fun. I wouldn't say it's as good as Set It Up. I think that's a more interesting film, more interesting dynamic. This one still plays around with like the formula. It doesn't go complete cliche where like you expect this to happen, it happens earlier, and then something else happens differently. So it's, I don't know, it's pretty decent. And I mean, that's like the general gist of the films. The only ones I genuinely would not suggest would be the ones that are utterly useless to watch, which is basically a lot of her earlier stuff, but unfortunately that almost includes Everybody Wants Some if you want to really cut back, like, if you go everything post, like, 2016, but then, like, you're missing out on Everybody Wants Some, and that's a really good film, so, yeah. I'd say if you're going to watch her films, Everybody Wants Some, good. Start from there and continue onwards. Just forget those bad studio comedies that, especially Why Him? Like, it's a bad film as it is, but she's also hardly in it. At least Dirty Grandpa, at least she's in it, you know? She's in it to a degree. It's not a great film, but at least she's in it, and she does something. She has a character. You actually like her because, oh, she's the cute, quirky, hipster-like girl. That's I like that, you know? Sure, I can dig that. But yeah, so in conclusion, though the majority of the films she has been in can seem generic or lackluster, she hasn't shied away from a shift in performance. She's very funny in Zombieland 2, she's nicely cartoonish in Buffalo, despite that being more for how the film and her character needed that extra flair to make the film entertaining. So yeah, she carries the film. She does that for a few films as well. I think the majority of the films she has starred in have been fun, with enough range that she can be in fun films, serious films, or your standard rom-coms. And I don't really put a detriment on rom-coms. They, for the most part, I think like 80% of rom-coms are shit. But that extra 20% can usually be just a bit more than mediocre, or really goddamn good. Because a lot of discourse when it comes to rom-coms. So just because she's in one doesn't mean it's bad. They're still good films. I'd say that maybe most of the fans know how well she performs in a romantic comedy, and it's always welcome when a new rom-com, you know, of hers comes by. But I definitely like to see her branch out to something else, as I don't want to have to sit through another Why Him or Dirty Grandpa, or, I mean, arguably Vampire Academy. But at the same time, she basically just was like, oh, what if I made a different and better teenage girl film, and she did that with Before I Fall. It's a completely different performance. It's a much better film for it, so yeah. Yeah, and she benefits from having been in some really good films in 2022 with The Outfit and Not Okay being some really top films and top performances, so she's definitely improving. She has a good effervescence to herself, and in most of her roles, an alluring energy that makes her characters more interesting and often more likable. I think that's usually the best way I can sum up her roles. She's likable. I'm Not Okay is like the complete opposite. Like, she's not likable, and that's the point. But yeah, she can, in general, even like her laziest film, can just... She's fine, you know. If an actor can bring in a semi-decent performance in a really shitty film, that's alright with me sometimes. If that's the only reason why I'm watching it, that's perfectly fine. Say, I think it was Christopher Lee had said that, like, he'd been in a lot of bad films, but he never gave a bad performance. So, there you go. And that's all for this review roundup for Zoey Deutch. If you've enjoyed this, feel free to like, share, and subscribe for more. Check out my other actor reviews. I've done a whole bunch from a range of different actors and actresses, and I even did a Japanese actress a few years back. I hope to do Ana de Armas next. I don't know if I'll get that up before the Oscars, mostly because Blonde and whatever, which I'm not going to rewatch, but I have watched it, so luckily it's on recent memory to some degree. But either way, yeah, feel free to check those out, and if you like this, feel free to like, share, and subscribe for more, and I'll see you next time. Adios.